Well, good evening. Welcome to our Wednesday Bible study. We're glad that you could be here with us this evening. I hope that we'll have a good class. So far, this study has been, I think, important. It's also something that is very powerful in our lives. In this lesson, going through the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a lot of things that we can understand that are applicable through the wisdom of Solomon. Lisa, and Becky, they're joining us online. See your comments here. So if you're online with us for the first time, let us know if there's any comments, input you'd like to provide. We can discuss while we're having the class tonight. So far, we've kind of gone through, as we've progressed through, Solomon has started this journey of trying to determine what is life about, what's the value of life, and everything around that he's seen around in the world, the pleasures, the career paths, the work, everything that you do, it just seems like that there's no real value in it without God. And that even at the certain point, last week, you get to he talks about being at the top. When you accomplish everything, you finally get to that spot where you think that life now has a value. And let's just assume that you're looking at it a worldly way, not without God. In other words, without God, you've accomplished everything. You're being able to go on the most pleasurable vacations. You have the best food there is. You've got the best career. You finally reached your point. This is where I also call midlife crisis, where a lot of times, we're journeying along. We're trying to find our way and establish ourselves. And we think, well, it'll be better if. It'll be better when. And it's always a win. And so you can kind of resolve and go, okay, well, I'll put up with this. I can endure this just a little bit longer because I'm not going to keep driving this car forever. It's embarrassing. It's ugly. Or, this job, maybe I'm sweeping and cleaning toilets and stuff. But that's okay, because, eventually I'm going to be, managing the people who do the cleaning or whatever. And so we have this drive towards trying to find self-fulfillment. And Solomon's journey is just trying to show us that any of it that we do, no matter how well we achieve it or not, if it's without God, then it's vanity. And that's because it's something that's in this physical world that we seek after, and we cannot continually remain satisfied with it. It'll always let us down. And so as he talks about it, it's kind of looking at the top down. And then tonight, we're going to look at this idea from verses of chapter 4, 7 through 12. What's it like to be at the top when you finally get at the top and you're there? And, a lot of especially successful people, and it not just successful, but people who reach that midlife point where they've accomplished maybe the peak of where they're going to be at, or they're reflecting that they've accomplished all these things and yet they're still not really satisfied. There's something lacking. Then there becomes this loneliness, and there's kind of a loneliness at the top, a lack of connection sometimes, and feeling like, what have I accomplished? Do I need to redirect? And we just start questioning and it kind of self-evaluating your own personal worth to yourself. A lot of our struggles, honestly, it's with us, ourselves. It's internal. And the way that we run ourselves down is horrible. Horrible. We degrade ourselves, we run ourselves down, and we compare ourselves to everything else. And so Solomon, we know Solomon was a king, and he had accomplished everything that a man could accomplish. He reached the top. And it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. When you get to the top and you're there, then what's next? Where's the next top? Where's the next point? What's the next high? What's the next pleasure? What's the next? What's the next? And that is where, when we start accomplishing, maybe even once you've accomplished it all. And I think this lesson is both not only those who have accomplished everything like Solomon and then looking around and seeing, it's kind of lonely up here, but there's also an effect that we have in our lives where we reach a point again where we start to have this challenge of loneliness, of isolation. And it kind of fits with the view that when we start looking around, like in our last lesson, he talked about what did he see? And as you're journeying through your life and you're accomplishing things, what do you really see? Well, you see like what Solomon saw. You saw oppression, you saw envy, and you see disillusionment. You see the reality of maybe that career path and what it really entails, and you go, oh, this was a terrible idea to become a doctor, become a teacher, to become a lawyer. You start realizing what it's like. You're like, oh, man, oppression. And that's what he saw, the lack of justice. In a world that is without God, not following God, this is what we'll end up seeing at some point in your life. We all come to that point, and then it causes us to then wonder and have this loneliness. And so, it involves a couple of ways when we talk about loneliness. There's the emotional, way that we feel about it. It's a feeling, but there's also the way you view life, your perception. There's a lot of lonely people in crowds of thousands of people. And you can be very lonely in a group of 100. And you go through New York City. I've never been there. I've been in a few crowded cities where when you're walking down the sidewalk, you can feel very alone, even though there's 500 to 1,000 people all around you. Go to a big sporting event and walk out and go to the concession stand. And you can feel very alone, right? Even though there's human beings all around you, but you feel very alone and you don't know any of them. You don't have a connection with them. And there's also the isolation that creates it, to where we isolate ourselves physically. We literally start, withdrawing or not having those associations and then being alone. I've often been fascinated by the early travelers in the West and the Midwest. There are times when the Oregon Trail and the good old Western days when you would have to ride a horse for 3 months or a wagon 6 months to get across. And the time, now our lives are so filled with sounds and noise and information that when you were living in that day and age where you had no connection except for nature and maybe whoever might be around you and your horse and your cattle or whatever, what a different life. I think that if you were to take us and put us in that environment, we would feel very alone. The first time that I went backpacking by myself in the Gila Wilderness, it was a weird feeling, and I reflected back on it, was that because as I'm walking along, at first, I'm getting ready and I get all my stuff on and I just start going. And then slowly I start realizing I'm by myself, and I'm like, I'm okay with that. It was okay. It was still daylight. I didn't hear any bears. Nothing was frightening. Nothing was threatening me. But it did. It kind of popped in my head. Because then I started thinking, do I have my satellite emergency SOS on? And we just have that within us, even in the physical way. And this is a reflection, I think, emotional too. A lot of times we're journeying through life and all of a sudden we start to realize the condition that we're in or what's around us and stuff. And so it starts to make us reflect internally and think about it. And even that night, when I'm down in that canyon out there by myself and there's a report of a bear supposedly out there, and I was like, and I'm just sitting there and there were moments I started thinking about it and I had to stop myself and go, relax, there's how many thousands of people have come into the wilderness and they walked out? All we hear about is what? The bear attacks and people get killed. And all of a sudden you go, oh, it's going to be me. I know I'm going to be the next. And then it meant, but who did that? I did it. I did it to myself. And so that's, I start, and then after, I was like, this is fun. This is okay. But it's still, the isolation as well. Physically being isolated in your community or your family, when you stop engaging with people, it can have the same effect. And I think they're kind of related because sometimes when we have that emotional isolation that we start to build up, that we start to then pull away. We pull back from talking to people and being engaged in people that in relationships. You probably had friends and you may have done it yourself, where there were times in your lives where all of a sudden you just didn't call your best friend anymore. Not that you were mad, you just didn't want to talk. And so you just don't call anyone. You don't talk to them anymore. You just, and you start to, You see people isolate. And then what's crazy is what it's doing to yourself internally. Because then guess who your best person is you're talking to? Yourself. And remember, I don't know about you, but my subconscious mind is not that friendly to me at times. It's not. It's reminding me of every little flaw I've got, right? It just keeps reminding me of what I failed, what I'm not able to do, what everybody else is doing. And so I think it's an emotion that felt, that we have. And it is dictated, like I said, by either an emotional separation or maybe a physical separation as well. And being cut off from others, this perception, that's what we feel like. We feel like we're cut off from others. And we don't realize it, but that's what we're allowing ourselves to believe, is that we are separated or cut off from others. Now, why? That's where we start to play the game. We start to go through that, and I kind of thought about it is it's kind of like this idea of, just go with me with this illustration of like visiting this island, where there's nobody on it. You're by yourself, this island of loneliness where we travel to it and we feel like I'm safer there. It's quiet. Nobody can bother me. Nobody can pick on me. Nobody can give me any troubles. And then, this island of loneliness, it's kind of normal. I want to bring that up too. It's a normal emotion that we do go through, that we will have, I call it ebb and flow, where we will have moments of, depression as well as happiness, and we go through those. It's the balance that's so critical. We can't stop the highs and lows of life. They're going to just keep happening, up and down. When you're on the roller coaster of life and things are going great and you're wonderful, your health is great, family's great, everything's fine, but then what happens? It's going to come down. It's the highs and lows. That's one of the things with, bipolar, psychiatric problems, is that the opposite poles, they cannot control the radical switches between the high and the low. And so that radical shift is so catastrophic to them in any direction. But we all have them. We all have those ups and downs in that separation. So, a lot of times though, we get trapped on that island. We get trapped. We get trapped there and we start kind of, maybe a little self-pity, but we start fulfilling our own prophecies about ourselves. You are what you think. I've always thought that. Every time my little self in me starts to beat up on me, I start going, oh, whoa. I'm not what you're trying to make me think, And I don't win. I don't win them all. You don't win them. The reality is reality. We are not who we wanted to be. We are who we are now. We're not who we used to be. Right? I am who I am. And that's that part of acceptance. And when we can't have that acceptance, then we start looking at what I could have, should have did, right? And could have, all these different things that it would have been better now if I'd have done this in the past, or I had all this wonderful things and these looks and weight and all these things, and I had it in the past, but look at me now. And if this is what I am now, then, oh man, what am I going to be in 5 years from now? And then that's that vicious island of loneliness that starts to pull us apart. And so, I always say, you've been on that island too long, when you start saying things like, why don't people love me or help me? Why are they not doing that? And it's a way, again, that we start to justify. Because that's the biggest thing. We have to reason. That's another part of our psyche, is that we're as well always trying to say, well, why am I here? How did I get here? And a bad road is to stay on that island of isolation and start coming up and thinking like, well, why don't people love me? I ask the first question is, why do you think they don't? just because you have an argument or something, and then so you have to really, and then help me. And a little of it is we start to have a little, I call it my own little pity party, where I have this pity for myself, and then I start getting into a spiral. And that spiral's tight and forceful, and it will hold you. And it'll just keep holding you there. Another one that we say a lot of times is, boy, if people just realize how difficult it was for me. So they're going to love you more because they know, or less? But that's where we threw something up in between because we're isolated. We're not talking to anybody. Who are we talking to? Myself. And so we're stuck in that. And if that's all we're listening to, then we start to have these type of rationalizations and trying to say, boy, if just people knew how hard it was and how difficult things are for me. Well, maybe they don't know because you haven't told them. Maybe it's shame or pride that you're not sharing it. And no, that's not it. It's just because people just don't know. They just don't. And so they don't have. And so we again, these are those justifications that we do. And this is a big one. Nobody cares. I'm alone in this. I'm alone in this, and nobody cares. And I tell you what, man, the prophet Elijah is I think one of the greatest balancing and pulls me back so often, because when I think about what he went through, this is a guy who had the greatest spiritual victory. Oh my goodness. This is my crazy granddaughter, so I should go live and just show her. My goodness. Thanks, Addison. Put it on silent. Okay. Is that when I think about Elijah, the prophet, and how he had this amazing spiritual victory over the prophets of Baal, a national event, where he challenged all the false prophets of Israel to come to Mount Carmel and to go ahead and let's have a showdown. You offer your sacrifice to Baal, and then I'll offer to Yahweh. And whichever one accepts the offering, then that's the true God, and then he says it. Then you follow him. So if Baal comes down and he accepts this offering and my God doesn't, then that's who we need to follow. And of course, all day goes through, they're dancing, and they get to the point where they're cutting themselves trying to get Baal to come down and to accept their offering. And then Elijah walks up and he takes water, right? And he douses it with water. And then he prays to the Lord. The Lord, boom, burns it up. And everybody was, yes, amening. And he said, kill those false prophets. And he destroyed them, right? Then all of a sudden he gets one death threat from one wicked woman, Jezebel. And he runs like a madman, scared to death. And nearly kills himself in the process. 40 days running through the desert. Goes to a cave. That's his island. That's his island. And he goes into this cave and he's hiding. And the Lord comes to him in a small, quiet voice. What are you doing here? And then he says, oh Lord, just kill me. Take me now. It's a failure. I'm just as bad as my fathers before me, the prophets. Nobody's listening to me. Now think about it. Nobody's listening to me. Dude, 40 days ago, you were standing on Mount Carmel and you just showed that there is a God and fire came from the sky and burned it up, and you're sitting there saying, oh man, nobody loves, nobody's following you. Just take me. And the Lord said, there's still 7,000 that have not bent their knee to Baal. Get up. Get busy. I got a task for you. And I think that's something that is very important for us to realize. Here's a man of God that everybody looks at as the greatest prophet. Accomplished something that hardly anyone ever did. And yet he had his moment on this island as well, right? He had the same thing. Nobody cares. I'm all alone in this. If everybody just knew how hard it was to be a prophet. All of these things do it. And I think, and this is another thing that happened, and we overlooked this in that episode there with Elijah, was that when he had a servant with him. He had a student, in a sense, an assistant that traveled with him, a companion. This is the first thing he did wrong. And this is the first thing he did. He took him home and left him there and took off without him. What's he doing? He's isolating, isn't he? He's alone, and he's alone with himself. And sometimes being alone with yourself is not good. It's not, what'll happen is you're going to end up in a cave or on an island all by yourself. But I also want to tell you, there's a calm little voice of the Lord talking to you. He's always talking to us. And so too often we let the storms or self-pity or things that we're doing, debasing ourselves, to overwhelm. And we can't hear that loving voice. And the Lord, like I said this last Sunday, the Lord doesn't see us with the same value that we value ourselves, thankfully. Because my value, the way I see my value to the Lord, is nothing. But the Lord doesn't see us that way. He sees us through the blood of his Son. And we are very precious to him. And see, now this is all linking to this idea of somebody under the sun without God. You're going to end up in a dark cave. You're going to end up on an island by yourself. And you're going to have these ideas, these little pity statements of, if people just knew how bad I had it. Why don't people care or love about me? And that is a sign. That's your sign, okay? It's time to get off. You need to get out of that cave. You need to get off that island. And you need to make some changes. Because the section here that we're dealing with is really this idea that we cannot enjoy life to the fullest as a loner. I know. There's some people, that want to be a loner. And again, going back to the Western days and the frontier days, like in the 1840s, whenever the fur trappers were out here in the West in 1830s and out here, and they would spend literally like the whole winter by themselves, no one to talk to, worrying about the Indians, and sitting there and all that isolation. And some people, well, I would just love to do that. I don't know. I don't know,
Isn't it even true when God saw Adam alone, that he was like, look, kind of like when he named everything else for him to be, he named all the animals, he did all this and the animals, but he was like, well, wait a minute. He's out here alone and he doesn't have anyone that's compatible. And he didn't even see fit for Adam to be alone, so he made him a mate. That is a
great segue to what that's. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, so because in that sense of saying, I always looked at that. I always looked at that as saying, even though when people do have, have mishaps in life and separation may come or come about, but I've always believed that God still didn't create us to be alone.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of the creative story. Is that when God creates man and the whole world is in place, his first job is to do what? Name the animals. But is that the real purpose? Couldn't he have named them after he had his partner? He could have. No, he could have. Yeah. Hey, Eve, what do you think about this thing? Looks like a giraffe. Yeah, the test could have been done. Eve probably would have come up with some better names, than Adam, a giraffe. Hippo, us guys, we're not very creative, So it wasn't about, it was more about teaching him something, that he was incomplete.
Mm-hmm. Yep, there you go.
He was not truly mankind. He was not man without woman. And he had to get man to learn himself. Sometimes you have to do that to people, don't you? You have to go out and experience it and then go, wait a minute, you know what? All of them have a partner, an opposite, but I don't. Very good, Adam. That's what I'm trying to show you. And that's something I want you to remember, right? Yep. You are nothing without your partner. That's right. Without your spouse. Yep. So this is a hit on us guys, but I think it kind of shows how hard-headed we are. We had to have a lesson like that, instead of God just saying, okay, now look, Ron, I'm going to give you a wife and she's going to be the most important. No, we had to go through the process of visually learning it and then coming to our own conclusion and going, wait a minute, I don't have one. And so that's kind of this process too, is loneliness, is to realize that we were never created to be alone. That's right. We were never created to be alone. And so life without God and without somebody can't be lived to its fullest. True loners are miserable. True, genuine loners in isolation, emotionally and physically, are miserable. It's not as glorious as what they say. So sometimes, there reaches a point where we have to send up a smoke signal, man. You're in trouble. Get off that island. You got to figure it out first off and realize I am there. I'm stuck in this deep, dark cave. I'm on an island. But don't just stop there with the reality, You have to then, go on. And this is where, when we move into this, paddle to another island. Walk out of the cave. Just start by walking out of the cave. Get into the sunlight. You got to take that step. Drop a note in a bottle. Do something. And that's what has to happen instead of coming out. That's the reaching out. We have to reach out, but we have to self-identify. You have to identify that I'm on an island, I'm in this cave. Because a lot of people are going to look, and maybe they're not as close to you. A lot of people don't walk up. There's very few people that I know well enough that I can walk up and say, hey, come on out of the cave. I know you're in there. You need to come out. Come talk to me. Come out of that cave. So that you got to take the steps, in other words. And so this is where I love this. And we've heard these, and starting with Ecclesiastes 4:9. It's beautiful. 2 are better than 1 because they have good return for their labor. That's what's so common sense about these as well, is just look at the multiplying factor of the 2 together, the efforts together. And everything. You might be able to do it. But if you had somebody else, you could do it better. And I'm bad about that because, around the house, I'll do a project and I'll get over my head and I'll just find a way to get a board to prop that thing up against there and cut it while I'm on a ladder. Right, Gary? Silly things like that. That we'll do. Where my friend Mike is at home, and I could have just called him and said, "Hey, Mike, could you come over and hold this for me?" No, Ron's going to do it himself. And there's a lot of times I've been really embarrassed because Mike will come over and he goes, "What are you doing up there?" "Well, I'm getting this. I'm going to, he goes, "You need some help?" "No, I think I got it." It's almost not funny, is it? So what stops us? See? Pride. Pride. A lot of times I'm embarrassed because he probably doesn't have a better way to do it, and I think I can do it my way. Instead of saying, well, you know what? You're right. Let's use a step stool and let's bring the thing lower and cut it. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. So we kind of go through that so this idea that, 2 are better than 1, everything that we do together is going to be just better. Two of us together is going to be better, everything that we have. And so he goes and shows another aspect in the next verse in 10. For if either of them falls, the other will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. That's kind of my biggest fear when I'm by myself hiking, biking, is that if I fall, now I do have a Garmin, or not a Garmin, but it's a satellite SOS thing, but how long is it going to take them to get to me? Can they find me? But it's that idea that, if I fall, and I've been times where I've crashed and I've had somebody help untangle me from my bike, and you okay, and get you up. And there's just so much about having that companion to help us when we're hurt, and whether it's emotionally, physically, whatever it is in our lives. But we have to have that humility there. And the world puts pride versus humility. The world places that in. A world without God is trying to be independent like a stubborn little child. And it won't ask for help. And instead of being humble and accepting that who we are, and I don't know it all, I can't do it all, and I need your help. That's a hard statement, I think, for all of us. And me too, but that's what's so beautiful is this in verse 10. Verse 11. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And I almost think of survival, I remember when we were in the military, when we were in training, they were talking about winter training up in Minnesota, and they were talking about, if it gets real cold and how to survive in the winter. They were telling us, strip down and two of you get in a sleeping bag together, and we just busted out laughing. That ain't gonna happen. No way. Not me. I ain't getting in bed, with this guy. If it's survival, and you can increase your warmth. And I'll tell you what, there's always those times where you've had a nice warm bed and all of a sudden somebody rolls away and it gets real cold. I think that's why Suzanne got an electric blanket. She don't need me no more. But it's, two together, that type of warmth. I love this verse, because it's not just about the heat, is it? There's a warmth there. Yep. The two together. Yep. There's that emotional warmth that we gain, when two are together as well. And showing this companionship that can't be applied. And, this applies as well in marriage, friendships, everything, and especially as well as our relationship as Christians. All of this is so imperative. If we can't do it with our individual lives, then we're really going to struggle when it comes to sharing this with each other as Christians.
That's right. Amen. That's true.
And that's the kryptonite to our fellowship. It really is.
Scripture. We have scripture in Galatians 5:13. Bear one another, burdens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like what you're saying as Christians. That's something that we really need to try to understand, that we are here for one another to do just that, to help one another. Not everybody can trust everybody, even though we should be able to. From how we come about our relationship, we should be able to have that trust.
Mm-hmm.
But we definitely are supposed to be there for one another, to be able to confide in and to help, to bear. Because all of us come from different strides of life. We all have different situations that has happened in our life. But if we learn to come together and bear our burdens with one another, as opposed to trusting and confiding in someone, it helps take the load. That's what that's for, to help take the load off that person who's trying to bear that burden alone.
Well, and that is so true. That's exactly what, Paul says in Galatians, the idea of bearing with one another, mm-hmm. Bear with one another, not put up with each other. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Boy, I sure have to bear a lot with you, Ron. No, not that. It's help out, yeah. Right? It's a helpful. Carry that burden, carry that emotional load. And now, in every social dynamic, there are, like you brought up, there are different personalities. And in society as well. There are some people who culturally are connected, different things that make them more comfortable, and they can share certain things, And then even within the congregation here, because of the diversity of just different people, mm-hmm. We're not one unique, same clone personality. We've had different experiences, different likes, and that's the complexity. That is also one of the beautiful things that the prophet was talking to, the prophets were pointing to, was how that this new kingdom was going to be so powerful because of our diversity. That you bring something because of your culture. Because like I said, like Mike coming over and saying, well, why don't you just come down on a step stool and change it? You have something you're bringing, and that brings strength to my weakness. And my things that I know strengthen your weaknesses. But if we're not islands in a stream in a congregation, even. And you're not going to, and it's not like you're going to be able to open up to everybody in the church just because they're Christians either. There are groups that, just naturally have started having friendships a little more. It doesn't mean you're left out. It doesn't mean they don't like you. I see that all the time. There are some of you that have a little different relationships, a little closer. You talk to each other a little bit more than me and me with some others. Even Gene and I have seen it as elders. There are some that are very comfortable going to Gene and he knows and has a relationship in a different way. And then I have some people that come to me and don't go to him per se. And I think that's important. That's powerful.
Yes.
But we still have to find that. It doesn't mean you share everything equally with all of the people in the congregation.
That's right.
You find somebody
That's right.
that you can share with. And you need to find somebody that you can open up to and become that one, the strength that's in there. And the next one is, in 12, the first part, if anyone can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. So to me, that helps. It shows us the power we have in overcoming things. That, when we're attacked spiritually, when there's somebody there helping us, praying with us, discussing it, it gives us more power, more strength. And you're not alone. You're not alone in it. There's a lot of power in that, being able to overcome things that attack us directly or spiritually too. It's something there.
That's the verse where there's two or more in the midst, like I'm saying, how Christ, there you're using a demonstration of it being two. Where there's two or more in the midst, his name is spoke, he's like, I'm there. And
Yeah.
Again, he's displaying like it being more, not to say that a person don't have their personal relationship with praying with God, but in that emphasis, he emphasized like, hey, well, there's two or more in the midst. Trust me, I'm in the midst of that conversation. I'm with y'all in that conversation.
Yeah, everything that he has set up is plural.
It's plural.
It's plural.
Yep,
Right. Two or more, I'm there. Everything is plural. It's not meant to be independent. And I thought about it, is that when somebody is in that state where they feel like, well, they can handle it, they can do it, they can be a loner, they can do everything. You know what they are? They're a little g God. And I say little g because the big G God is the real genuine God, in other words. And what's a God? A God is somebody, it's something that can do anything and needs nothing else. God needs nothing. God can do everything, right? Yep. God can create, he can destroy, he can do whatever he wants because he is it. Wow. Doesn't that sound like what some people do? Yeah. I can do it. I don't need you. I can provide everything I need. That's why I say people in the world without God, they become a God to themselves. Because they have nothing to do except make it happen. And so then they think they're the ones making it happen and thinking that I can do it by myself. And that's why I say they become a little g God. And there's no such thing.
You have people nowadays that's even using that term self-made.
Self-made.
Yeah, I'm self-made. And I'm looking at them like, do you realize what you just said? Never mind. Okay. See what you made yourself.
When I hear that, there's a lot of different layers to that onion. When somebody says, I'm self-made, one, absolutely not.
That's
but
right.
The other thing is, what about everybody who has been a part of where you got where you're at?
That's right. That's right.
You have just totally disrespected them, haven't you?
That's right.
You're just such a user.
And that's the way I look at that. When I view that the same way, I'm like, wow, so you just forgot about your mom who made you, your dad who made you, God who made you, so you just came out, made yourself. It's like, okay,
I mean, everything, the environment in which you grew up in shaped you into a person who is able to accomplish that.
That's right. That's right.
Fundamentally, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a little G God.
Yeah, it sure is.
Absolutely. That's a little G God. The next part in B of the chapter of verse 12 there, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. You know, that is where the strength, if you ever look at a rope, you'll never find a rope, even synthetic rope, that is one thread. It's not. It's wove in the way you braid it, and they spin those together. And why? Because a lot of ropes, you can cut, and several of those, you can go pretty deep, and it can still hold. And so there's some beautiful application in this, that, you know, that there may be many of us, and the more there are of us, there may be some that, you know, are going to be weak at times, but the rest of us are able to hold that and give that power and maintain that integrity, that strength. A cord of 3 strand is not quickly torn apart. You know, that's what. So let's look at some antidotes. What's the medicine? One is we have to just absolutely understand that the storms of life, companions help us. Don't try, you know, to swim it alone. You know, understand that is the time you need the companions, is during those storms. And when you see them coming, just like if you were on a boat and you saw a storm come up and you don't have your life vest on, you're not going to wait till the boat's capsized to look for your life vest. I hope not, right? You start looking for it. You look for the safe. You look for, you know, the flare. You look for the inflatable raft. You start preparing. You don't wait until, you know, the boat's upside down and you're in the water. And then it's too late. You can't find a flare because it floated off. Life vest, they're at Bob's over there. We have to be prepared. And don't say, well, you know, it's just a little wind. It's okay. You don't know. You don't know. That storm of life could just turn into a hurricane on you, and attack. So that's where, if we already have these companionships and value them and using them and understanding them, then when they come up, you're already prepared. You're set. You're set to go ahead and take it on. So companions also reassure us when we're vulnerable, right? When you're trash talking yourself, that companion goes, oh, come on, really? No, you're not. You're not that bad. It helps. It helps. And then, because then you catch yourself and go, yeah, there's somebody always worse and there's always someone better than what's going on in your life right at that moment. There's somebody that has experienced a whole lot worse and there's always somebody better. But the companion helps to bring us back to that reality when we're vulnerable like that. So I think that's kind of the antidotes. The fundamental is value those companionships and keep them healthy, keep them vibrant, so that whenever your cord is tested, whenever the storm of life is coming on you, when you're wanting to crawl back into that cave, you have a safety word, that somebody go, whoa, walk away from the cave, Ron, get away, come on, come here, nope, and your companions will do that. The ones that really, your good companions. So we have to also, though, understand that it can strike anyone. And that's what Solomon is bringing up in this lesson, is that here he was, how lonely it was at the top. We've talked about how, even we look at people who are extremely successful and where we think we would want to be, and yet it's not all that, is it? It's not all that. And we hear stories all the time, where people who are famous, are very well known in the public, they can't go anywhere. But yet they're very lonely. They're very vulnerable, and suicide rates are high with them. Depression, drug, alcoholism, right?
The football player, Marshad.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
24 years old.
Rashad, right?
Rashawn.
Rashawn with Dallas Cowboys. Right after the game, the next day, destroyed himself.
body. He just couldn't take it. I mean, and he had a baby on the way. Wow.
See, and that is what is so tragic, isn't it? There were so many beautiful things. He had caught his first touchdown, professional football touchdown in that game that night before he died. He had a baby on the way. See, we can sit and look at how many people would love to be in that position. How many young boys would say, man, I would love to be there. No, if you were Rashawn, you're miserable, you're pain, you're hurting. You know, it's that type of a feeling of isolation. And you're at a point, and it's always fascinated me and just puzzled me and breaks my heart to think that somebody gets to a point in their lives where the best option is to destroy themselves.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
It just baffles me, you know. And whenever I was a paramedic, there was this young kid, I just sat, and I was just fascinated. I wasn't picking on him. I was like, I really want to understand why you think that's a good option. And we had like a 30-minute conversation while we were in the back of an ambulance. And everything he said was isolation. It was totally about him being alone as if he was on Mars. And all he saw was the darkness of the moon. He couldn't see green tree if he wanted to, because that's where he had crumbled into that cave so deep and dark. And then so I started asking him some positive things. I said, well, you got a family? Yeah. You got a brother? Yeah, I've got nieces. And I said, wow. I said, that's pretty cool. You're going to college, you've got a scholarship, and we just started. That's why that suicide, that young man, the football player.
Yeah. You would have thought he had it all.
And that's the thing. Life under the sun without God is vanity of vanities, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
It truly is. Yeah. So God's answer, to cultivate companionship where you are, not where you're going to be, not reaching back to your friends that you were in high school and Facebook that you don't know, you may think you do 40 years later. They're not your friends. It's because it says Facebook friend. Cultivate the people around you that's in your life right now. Because a lot of times, that's another thing I see, is people will start just associating with people they wouldn't normally associate with and making these companions and these friends that don't really know them, and then they get drug into that influence.
That's right.
They get drug into that influence, and that is a dangerous one as well. But the companions that you have now that you're sure of, don't neglect them. Revitalize them, rebuild them. Because again, they'll help us in those storms. They reassure us when we're exposed, and they know you, right? Most of the ones that you really have, if they know you and you've cultivated a good companionship, they know how you hurt. They know kind of those things. And so they know when you start to, they know exactly when you start to make a right-hand turn towards that island or that cave. Because they know how you hurt. They know the things that you have been hurt in life and what your weaknesses are. And they can help bolster you up when they start sensing that about you. So when it comes to loneliness, to wrap up the class, really, it's one person plus a friend equals survival. One person plus a friend. And that friend's your wife, hopefully. And, your friends that you have, your family, hopefully. And especially, I hope you understand that your Christian family. They're your companions. They're the ones that help you through all of this. So we don't need to be lonely. God doesn't want us to be lonely. Like we said in the creative order, He didn't want us to be lonely. Don't be lonely. And there are moments, you can't prevent it all, but when you sense it, don't spiral off. Don't allow yourself to continue down that. Contact your companion. Open up. And sometimes not even telling your companion exactly what's happening, but just talking to them helps. Hey, can we talk? Go for a cup of coffee? And maybe you don't even bring up that there's something very personal and deep going on, but you have somebody. And then, there's been times just talking to somebody else and not talking about exactly what I'm struggling with at that moment, being very detailed, but just talking to them and having somebody. I don't feel alone. I don't feel alone. Because I know this companion values me. All right. Well, let's have a prayer before we dismiss. Our most glorious Father, this is such a challenging world that we live in. It's a beautiful one, and you did create it perfect. It's sin and the effects and consequences of sin that has made it more challenging for us. But we know that we can still enjoy it if we glorify you in our lives, if we seek after your first and foremost great companionship and keeping that we can then value those that are around us, build those companionships to be able to overcome the loneliness that we may face. We ask, Father, to please don't allow us into those caves. Help us and not allow us to become deaf to your beautiful, tender, gentle voice to keep us away from it. We love you so much, and we're so thankful that you value us more than we value ourselves. And we pray that you would encourage us and strengthen us and protect us until we meet again. In Jesus' name, amen. So until we see you Sunday morning at 9:45, we hope you can join us for Bible study. We're doing the Gospel of Mark. And this Sunday, we've got somebody else preaching. So that alone should encourage you because you don't have to listen to me. So somebody else is going to be preaching, Ryan. So go to YouTube. It's already programmed. Give you a little teaser if you want to know what the lessons, the sermons are going to be on. I'll be teaching a Bible class. But Ryan Herring will be preaching the classes, sermons that morning. So until then, God bless.